In the flickering candlelight of a forgotten monastery high in the Bavarian Alps, a secret waits beneath the dust of centuries. The monks who once dwelled here swore an oath of silence, not for peace, but for fear. A parchment hidden within the hollow spine of an ancient psalter predicted events no human should have known. The rise of nations, the fall of empires and wars that scorched the earth. 3 were written with perfect precision, each bloodier than the last. But beneath the ink of the Third War's final date lies a smudge, a blur that refuses to yield to time or reason. Scholars whisper that the ink itself moves, like living shadow. Now, after 200 years of silence, the monastery's sealed vault has opened once more, and the last surviving historian who dares to read the scroll feels the air itself tighten, as though history is holding its breath. Somewhere between prophecy and madness, the final line begins to stir. The vault smelled of copper and old rain, the air heavy with centuries of secrets. Inside, the scroll cases were chained not for preservation, but containment. Dr. Grunewald whispered fragments of prayers as he brushed off dust that had not been disturbed since the plague years. Each case bore a seal, carved with the sigil of an unnamed order, a winged serpent biting its tail. One seal had cracked, its contents already missing. The silence between him and Mara deepened as they realized the monastery's archives had been breached long before their arrival. On a nearby table lay a stack of fresh photographs, images of the same scroll taken decades apart, each showing the blurred line shifting shape. It was not smudged by time, but rewritten by something still at work. Somewhere beneath the monastery, a mechanism began to click. In the monastery's records, Mara found a note penned in 1917 by an unnamed monk who claimed to have seen the prophecy unfold through fire and smoke. His words trembled across the page, that each war was not predicted, but summoned. He described the scroll as a mirror of consequence, a reflection that becomes real when read aloud. The ink, he wrote, was not made of pigment, but of blood mingled with iron ash. As she read those lines aloud, the lantern flickered. The temperature dropped sharply. Dr. Grunewald's breath fogged the air. Somewhere deep in the stone, a bell that hadn't rung in a century gave one single toll. The more they studied the scroll, the more it resisted their scrutiny. The blurred section behaved like a living wound, its texture altering under heat, light, even sound. Mara recorded thermal readings while Dr. Grunewald cross-referenced ancient meteorological omens tied to each war. Each time they mentioned the coming forth, the candles bent inward, their flames drawn toward the parchment. The sound of a heartbeat seemed to echo faintly through the room, though neither dared to speak of it. That night, neither slept. The monastery creaked under the strain of wind and history, its stones remembering every prophecy that came true. By dawn, exhaustion and dread fused into revelation. Mara noticed the blurred line wasn't random. It mirrored constellations visible only once every 2 centuries. The ink was forming a celestial map, its trajectory pointing toward a date soon to come. Dr. Grunewald, trembling, realized the final war described was not a past tragedy, but an approaching one. As the first light of morning broke through the stained glass, it struck the scroll, and for one fleeting second, the smear became legible. Both froze as the words revealed a name neither expected, not of a place, but of a person. Then, before they could speak, the ink moved again, and the word vanished. By mid-morning, thunder rolled across the peaks like an omen made flesh. Mara's data recordings showed fluctuations no natural phenomenon could explain. The ink responded, not to light or temperature, but to the rhythm of the human voice. Each time a fragment of the blurred line was read aloud, seismic sensors in the monastery registered vibrations beneath the foundation. Dr. Grunewald, weary yet driven, believed the scroll might be a conduit, a message written not from the past, but from a cycle repeating itself. Outside, Storm clouds gathered in unnatural formation, spiraling above the bell tower as if drawn to the scroll's pulse. And as they prepared to document their findings, the old wooden floor groaned, shifting slightly, as though something ancient beneath them was stirring awake. That afternoon, the power flickered, plunging the monastery into a rhythm of light and void. Between the flashes, Mara caught glimpses of figures carved in frescoes. Their painted eyes seemed to move. She recalled the legend of the first monk who read the prophecy aloud and vanished before dawn. The scroll's text pulsed faintly now, synchronized with her breathing. Grunewald's voice trembled as he recited a single phrase from the Latin text, and the walls vibrated in response. The monastery moaned like a living organism, its stone veins awakening. Then, from the sealed vault, a low resonance echoed upward, deeper and older than any wind. Something was calling back. Later that night, sleep refused them. Grunewald dreamt of parchment breathing, words bleeding into shapes that crawled across the floor. Mara recorded an audio log describing what she saw. Letters glowing faintly, rearranging into symbols that resembled constellations. Each configuration matched historic war dates perfectly, except the last, which formed an incomplete pattern. "It's missing a star," she whispered. But as she spoke, a faint tremor shook the lamp beside her, and the recording cut out mid-sentence. When she awoke at dawn, the recorder had moved to the scroll's edge, still blinking red as if someone, or something, had continued the dictation while she slept. At first, Grunewald refused to believe in supernatural interference. He spoke like a scholar, his voice steady, until the symbols from the scroll began to appear on the walls, written in wet, dark streaks that smelled faintly of iron. They followed him, crawling along the stone wherever he went, forming half-phrases that dissolved when touched. Mara recorded every second, her voice cracking as she pleaded for him to stop reading. But Grunewald pressed on, desperate to finish what the monk had begun centuries ago. The moment he spoke, the final incomplete line. Every candle in the monastery extinguished at once. The sound of whispering rose from the vault, hundreds of voices repeating his words back in perfect unison. By sunrise, Grunewald was gone. Only his coat remained draped over the lectern, his notes scattered across the floor. The scroll lay open beside it, the blurred section now perfectly legible. But the ink was still wet, shimmering as though freshly written. It contained not a prophecy, but a timestamp. The Fourth War begins at the sound of his voice. Mara replayed the last recording and froze. In the background, after his final word, came the faint echo of a bell, but no bell tower stood in the monastery anymore. When she turned toward the window, the mountains beyond were cloaked in unnatural fog, pulsing faintly with light, as if the prophecy had just begun to awaken outside. The monastery had fallen silent, not with peace, but with vacancy. Every echo seemed to hesitate. Every shadow lingered too long. Mara wandered through the corridors, clutching the scroll, her pulse steady only through sheer will. Grunewald's disappearance had left an emptiness she could not rationalize. On his last page of notes, she found a single sentence. He was never a prophet. He was a witness. The phrase sent her down the archive stairs again, where the air felt thicker, charged with static. Dust drifted like ash in unseen currents. Beneath a collapsed shelf, she found a bound ledger with a name scorched into the cover. Anselmus, 1522. It was written in the same hand as the scroll, the same ink that refused to die, and below it, a symbol she now recognized from her own childhood, etched once, long ago, on her family's chapel door. As she read the monk's journal, Mara realized Brother Anselm had never claimed divine vision. He'd confessed to hearing the wars before they began. The voices spoke in the language of thunder, dictating events centuries in advance. His final entry ended mid-sentence, followed by smudged handprints of dried blood. Between the pages lay a pressed violet, perfectly preserved, its scent faint but alive. In the margin beside it, a single phrase: "The fourth war will not be seen. It will be remembered." Mara's breath trembled as she understood what it meant. The war was not to come. It had already begun in memory itself, rewriting the past as the present. Somewhere in the stone, a low hum began again, slow and rhythmic. The pulse of a memory reborn. The deeper she read, the clearer the connection became. Anselm had belonged to a sect known as Custodes Temporis, the keepers of time. They believed that history was not linear, but cyclical, and that writing a prophecy was the same as binding a repetition. Mara's family name, Klein, appeared in one passage, descendants of the same order, sworn to guard the blurred line. Her pulse raced. The fog outside had thickened, and the monastery bells, silent for centuries, began to toll again. Not as echoes, but as a countdown. Each chime carried vibration through the stone, loosening flakes of plaster from the ceiling. The scroll on the table began to unroll by itself, the ink spreading like veins across parchment. Mara followed the sound of the tolling into the cloister. There, beneath the tower's shattered bells, she found the first of Grunewald's missing notes, pinned to a pillar by a rusted iron nail. Each page recorded a single word, each page older than the last, the handwriting shifting subtly as if written across centuries by the same hand. She realized the impossible truth. Grunewald had not vanished. He had been absorbed into the prophecy, becoming its next scribe. The final note bore her name in ink that was still wet. A cold wind swept the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of iron and candle smoke. The air shimmered, and for the first time she saw movement in the fog. Silhouettes that resembled monks, walking backward through time. Back inside the chapel, Mara laid the scroll across the altar. The last line had cleared completely now, the ink black and sharp. It bore one date, and her own name beneath it, a prophecy that named its final witness. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she realized the truth. The blurred line had never been incomplete. It had been waiting for her to arrive, to read it, to close the cycle. The candle flames bent toward her as though drawn to breath. Somewhere in the mountains, lightning struck thrice in perfect rhythm, echoing the monastery's founding prayer. The prophecy was no longer a warning. It was a summons, and her voice, trembling, began to speak. The storm did not end with dawn. It only grew more deliberate. Each flash of lightning seemed timed, each rumble of thunder a reply. Mara barely recognized her own voice anymore. The air around her shimmered when she spoke, distorting sound as if the monastery itself was listening. The blurred line on the scroll had vanished entirely, replaced by fresh ink forming in real time, new words shaping themselves as she breathed. It was writing her. The script coiled through her thoughts like smoke, urging her to repeat the words aloud. When she resisted, the candles sputtered violently, their flames bending toward her face. Then came the whisper. Not from within the room, but from inside her skull. A voice calm and ancient, reciting a phrase she somehow knew, the same one Anselm had written before his death. She began to record herself, desperate to separate what was real from what the scroll was creating. Her voice, fragmented, echoed, doubled, played back seconds before she spoke, like a loop closing faster than time. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the mountain's edge. On the horizon, faint flashes of light pulsed in perfect synchrony with the tolling bells, though no bell had swung since Grunewald's disappearance. Mara realized the monastery's architecture itself was a cipher, its towers and chambers forming the same pattern as the constellations in the prophecy. When she placed the scroll in the center of the floor, every compass needle in her equipment turned inward. Something beneath the stone was responding. In the hours that followed, reality began to unravel. Objects shifted positions when she looked away. Her recordings played back events that hadn't happened yet. Time folded, curling upon itself like pages turning backward. She saw brief flashes of Brother Anselm, his eyes hollow, his lips moving in sync with her own. Their voices merged in unison. History is a wound that never closes. Mara fell to her knees as visions of the past flooded her mind. Battlefields, cities burning, skies blackened by ash. Yet beneath the horror, she sensed pattern and intent. The wars were not random. They were corrections, self-balancing acts in the memory of the world. The Fourth War, the one she had read into being, was not destruction. It was restoration by erasure. Sure. By erasure dial I. Hours passed, or perhaps centuries. Time had lost its anchor. Mara wandered through corridors that seemed older than when she'd entered them, their walls covered in fresh carvings of events that hadn't occurred yet. Cities she recognized, dates not yet written in history books. The prophecy was rewriting itself through her, using her perception as its pen. Voices whispered from every direction. Some hers, some Grunewald's, others unrecognizable. They spoke of equilibrium, of sacrifice, of one final correction that required the witness to become the word. As she descended into the crypt, guided by light from nowhere, she finally saw it. The mechanism that bound the scroll's power. A stone disc covered in thousands of engraved names, half of them erased by age. The last empty space bore her reflection. When she touched the stone, the entire monastery shuddered. The bells rang all at once, their tones overlapping like the voices of the dead. The scroll's ink bled upward, forming shapes across the walls. Continents, names, timelines, all collapsing into one single point. Mara understood then. The blurred line had been her threshold, the veil separating knowledge from consequence. As the ink reached her skin, she saw the war's replay, not as battles, but as corrections of imbalance in human memory. And then, silence. Her voice joined the others, steady and solemn, inscribing her name into history's final line. The ink stopped moving. The prophecy was complete. The world outside held its breath, waiting to see if this ending would begin again. When light returned, it was no longer dawn. It was after. The monastery stood silent, its stones aged by centuries in a single night. Every instrument Mara had set up lay rusted, entombed in dust. Her voice echoed faintly from the recorder, still blinking red, though she was nowhere to be seen. In the valley below, the village clock tower read a date decades ahead. The world had shifted forward, subtly wrong. Roads bent where they never had. Names on maps changed without history to explain them. The prophecy hadn't foretold the Fourth War. It had rewritten time to prevent it. But the price was memory itself. The name Mara Klein no longer existed in any record. The world continued unaware, balanced on the silence of what it had forgotten. In a university archive hundreds of miles away, a graduate researcher named Jonas stumbled upon a mislabeled parcel, delivered with no sender's name. Inside was a fragment of parchment, sealed in glass, its ink still faintly pulsing. The Latin translation on its edge bore a single familiar word: Anselmus. As he scanned the fragment under ultraviolet light, a faint spectrogram of a woman's voice played through the lab's speakers. Low, rhythmic, unmistakably human. The timestamp on the file read 2 centuries earlier than the monastery's recorded founding. Jonas froze. The scroll had found its next witness. The voice from the fragment repeated itself nightly, whispering the same phrase Mara once heard. He was never a prophet. He was a witness. Jonas, methodical and skeptical, tried to trace its frequency pattern, but each playback revealed anomalies impossible for analog or digital systems. The waveform itself changed shape when viewed, forming human silhouettes in the spectrograph. One night, During analysis, the lab lights dimmed. The air filled with static. The parchment pulsed faster, glowing with the same ink that had once written itself centuries before. Then, between frequencies, came another voice, deeper, resonant, and unbearably familiar. It said his full name and whispered the date. Jonas traced the origin of the fragment to a monastery ruin in the Bavarian Alps, a location marked on no official record. Satellite imagery revealed the structure, yet on every map since the late 1800s, it had been replaced by forest. He printed the coordinates anyway, unaware that his actions mirrored those of another seeker a century before. As he packed his camera and field equipment, a folded note slipped from the parchment's case, its ink fresh, the handwriting elegant and distinctly feminine. It read, "Do not let them blur it again." The date below was tomorrow's. The final frame is the monastery once more. Now, overgrown, silent. The fog breathing across its ruins. A faint light flickers inside the chapel. The camera glides through the collapsed doorway, settling on the altar where the scroll once lay. The stone beneath it hums faintly. Then, as if answering an unheard call, a new line begins to write itself in the dust. Not in Latin this time, but in modern German. The fifth will begin when memory seeks truth. Outside, thunder rumbles over the valley again, rolling like something vast turning in its sleep. The prophecy has begun anew, patient, eternal, waiting for its next voice to speak. Jonas' descent into the Bavarian Alps began at dusk. The path that led to the monastery had long been erased from local maps, yet his compass needle spun wildly, guiding him by instinct more than direction. The deeper he trekked, the more reality seemed to distort. His digital watch reset every hour, the stars above subtly shifting. He recorded everything, his breath sharp in the cold, the fog thick as wool. When he finally reached the ridge, the ruins loomed below, like fossilized memory. The monastery was real, and yet wrong. Its stones half sunken into the earth, the geometry warped. A faint resonance vibrated in the air, a low hum that seemed to originate from the mountain itself. The moment he stepped through the broken archway, the fog behind him solidified, sealing him inside. Inside, the monastery was alive, with silence. His flashlight revealed murals older than any record, the same prophetic scenes found in the surviving scrolls, but with new additions painted over them. Cities of glass and metal, skies streaked with burning light. Jonas followed the sound of dripping water through the nave, where he found the altar fractured, the stone disk half buried beneath rubble. A faint vibration emanated from it, pulsing at the same rhythm as his heartbeat. As he brushed away the debris, the surface beneath began to shift, names appearing and fading like breathing ink. One of them was his. The air rippled with heat, though the room was freezing. The prophecy hadn't waited for him to arrive. It had called him home. He activated his camera, setting it on a tripod to document everything, unaware that the feed was already streaming across frequencies far beyond human range. The stone responded to his voice, vibrating whenever he spoke, as though language itself fed it. Jonas recited the fragments of Latin left in the glass case, the same words Mara once whispered in the monastery's final night. The stone's glow intensified, bathing the chamber in a pale blue radiance. The walls began to hum, not echoing him, but speaking with him. Each syllable triggered faint flashes of imagery: battles, cities, collapsing towers, and beneath it all a constant whisper. Email, soft, repeating. Do not let them blur it again. Hours bled into minutes, minutes into centuries. The monastery became a clock without hands. Jonas realized the hum beneath him was not mechanical but biological. a resonance shared between every witness who'd ever read the prophecy. The scrolls had not predicted events. They had recorded corrections. Each name added to the stone, another witness bound into history's loop. As he read further, his surroundings dissolved into overlapping eras. Monks walking backward through time, modern researchers studying ruins that hadn't yet been built, Mara whispering his words centuries earlier. The present folded into the past like layers of skin closing around a wound. He finally understood. Prophecy was not foresight, but infection. At the edge of exhaustion, Jonas knelt before the altar, his camera still recording. The stone now pulsed with steady light, a heartbeat of memory that no longer belonged to one century. He spoke Mara's final line aloud. The fifth will begin when memory seeks truth. The light intensified until the lens flared white. When it cleared, the chamber was empty, and his recording continued without him, showing the altar smooth, unmarked, untouched by time. Far above, satellites orbiting the Earth detected a sudden burst of non-electromagnetic frequency emanating from the Alps, lasting precisely 6 seconds. Across the world, every digital clock blinked the same minute in unison, and then moved forward, 1 hour, as if time itself had been quietly adjusted. Weeks passed before anyone noticed. It began with small anomalies, missing years in official archives, maps showing cities that never existed, families recalling events no one else remembered. The world felt slightly misaligned, as if it had skipped a breath. News networks debated software glitches. Historians whispered of data corruption, but none could explain the quiet hum that filled the atmosphere at night, a resonance at the edge of hearing, constant and patient. Deep in a government vault, analysts uncovered the 6-second pulse that had emanated from the Bavarian Alps. It matched no known signal. And yet, embedded within its waveform was a faint human voice. Translated and slowed, it spoke 5 words in perfect clarity. Do not let them blur. In Munich, a journalist researching the monastery incident found herself haunted by a dream. Fog rolling over ruined stone. A young woman's voice whispering coordinates she'd never learned. She traced them to a valley not listed on any map. There, the monastery ruins stood untouched, though every historical record claimed they'd been destroyed by avalanche a century ago. Her camera refused to capture the image. Every photograph showed only a smooth field of snow. Yet when she played back the audio from her microphone, she heard the bell tolling. The same one Mara had heard. The prophecy had reawakened, not in ink, but in sound. Meanwhile, across continents, inexplicable events rippled like aftershocks. Clocks desynchronized. Archival footage rewrote itself, and strangers shared identical memories of a war that never happened. The world's pulse, invisible yet rhythmic, seemed to adjust history in real time. In Berlin, a conference of physicists debated the temporal harmonic phenomenon. Only one among them noticed the repeating names hidden within the data. Anselmus, Grunewald, Klein, Weiler, and others yet unborn. The list grew daily. History, now sentient, was recruiting. The prophecy's purpose was no longer prediction, but preservation, by rewriting time through those who remembered. Far beneath the Alps, satellites detected an anomaly. A new chamber beneath the monastery ruins, recently formed, though the rock dated back eons. Within it lay a smooth obsidian surface covered in micro-engraved script. Thousands of names arranged in concentric circles. At the center, faint fingerprints pressed into the stone. One matched Mara Klein. Another, Jonas Weiler. Between them, a new set of letters shimmered faintly, forming and fading like breathing ink. The prophecy had not ended. It had evolved, merging flesh and time. And above, in the world that no longer remembered them, a new whisper began circling in every frequency. The 6th will not be written. As night fell across the world, time itself seemed to hesitate. A shared stillness felt in every heart. though no one could say why. In the Bavarian Valley, the fog returned, rolling like memory, reclaiming its shape. The monastery's ruins flickered once, solid, then gone, replaced by an unbroken field of wildflowers. The camera lingers on silence. Wind whispers through the grass where history once stood. And somewhere within that hush, faint and eternal, the echo of a woman's voice drifts through time. He was never a prophet. He was a witness. The sound fades, leaving only the heartbeat of the earth, steady, waiting.